Hi, I'm Alan Shepard, and today we're going to look around a sustainable garden. It's a wintry day, but there's a lot of aspects we can still see in this garden which make the garden environmentally sustainable. A few of those things, you don't have to have all of those components of a sustainable garden, but I guess the most obvious one is it needs to be an organic garden. That, in other words, chemical free. In this garden we grow a lot of our food, and that includes about 20 fruit trees as well as all the veggies, herbs and nut trees. Thirdly, a sustainable garden should be water-wise, especially in summer. That's when it's important because you can still grow a lot of exotic plants and not use a lot of water. A very important resource. But we also need to reduce the amount of energy in what we're actually using at the site, including materials, tools and that type of thing. Plus, lastly but not least, we need to make it a friendly, wildlife friendly garden. And in a moment we'll see some of the aspects of what makes a wildlife friendly garden. The plant here on my right is a Tigatis Lemonade. And it's an example of a plant which is drought tolerant. In this case, I've grown this one particularly because it gives golden flowers all through winter in the cold season. And that's when we need flowers. We need the flowers for the bees and the birds and the moths and the butterflies. So that's probably a good example, and it will last all through summer. Okay, we've started our little tour of the sustainable garden. And all around me I'm surrounded by exotic plants, but they're drought tolerant plants. And there's been a big focus in this garden with plants that have got flowers all seasons, including winter. For example, here we've got ajugas, and you quite often see on them lots of bees. In the background we've got salvias, and they're a particularly good plant to grow in Adelaide, especially through summer. This one in particular is still flowering. You can see the lovely little red and white flowers, and the native birds will go for them. Even though it's not a native plant, the native birds go for the nectar in them. And of course the marigold, quite a favourite, and lamb's ears, the common germander, and in the background we've got some more salvias, and in the middle a little bird bath to keep the birds happy. Okay, so we've moved now to the Veggie Patch, or one of the many veggie patches in this garden. We've got quite a few unusual plants too in it. We've got one that's not commonly grown in Adelaide, it's called a yacon. And then we've got the broad beans, and the broad beans will grow to about 1 metre high. And also we've got parsley, potatoes, lots of spinach, and also some sweet potato behind me here. I won't name all the plants, but we're actually getting a few weeds in the garden, which is fine. What I generally do, pull up the weeds and just put them as a mulch around the actual plants. We've also got, I mentioned before, we've got lots of fruit trees, and behind us we've got an espalier, apricot tree, and a native plant which is called the kangaroo apple. Quite an interesting one that has lovely blue flowers. And to my right we've got a bit of a mixture of plants. We've got the exotic salvias, we've got a pepino, same family as tomato, and it's got an edible fruit. We've got a little strawberry guava here, mandarin tree, and lots of other little plants interspersed in there as well. Behind me we have an area which is composting, so perhaps we'll go down there and have a little bit more look in the detail. So you can see I've got leaves there and material which we've chopped up and put in there. But I'm surrounded by the cone bins, the black cone bins here on my left, and as you can see, we've got 4 of them, and they're staggered. So in other words, when we start off by putting our food scraps in here, making sure we put dry material such as straw, and then we go on to when that one's full, we go on to the next one, and there's another one down here as well, which is currently the one we're using. Okay, so this part of the garden, it's actually we're under a little shade house, and in that we do our propagating, but also we've got some worm farms, and you can see here we've got 2 varieties, one of the commercial one, the black plastic tiered system, and here on the left we've got the white styrofoam boxes, which they're excellent in summer because it's hard to keep the worms alive. They're not just normal earthworms, they're composting worms. This particular species is called a red wriggler, and you can see they're trying to get away from the light. They don't like the light. So we'll put them back, and what we do, we use the castings for them to add, a bit like compost, we add that to the soil. Okay, so I'm behind a pond area, one of 5 ponds in this garden. We've got some reeds here and some rushes around nearby. Another little pond at the top here with a waterfall going into the bottom pond. So frogs live around this area. Also behind me we've got one of 5 grapevines, edible grapes, that are growing along this trellis of the pergola. And to my right here, little fruit worth pointing out, subtropical fruit called Tamarillo, and that's got a lovely orange fruit in more late summer, early autumn, very edible. Same, once again, it's actually the same family as the tomato plant. Well, that pretty well concludes the little tour, brief tour of this particular sustainable garden. A couple of things I didn't mention, the water-wise aspect. Drought-tolerant plants, very important, but also drip irrigation, and that all the veggies in this particular garden and the fruit trees are on drip irrigation because it is very efficient. Right next to me you can see the glory vine. That's providing shade, keeping the house cool in summer, but obviously losing its leaves at the moment. Fantastic red colour. It's letting sun into the house. And a couple other little things I didn't also mention, the bat boxes. We've got bat boxes which they're not for the fruit bats, but they're actually for the micro bats. We're trying to encourage them. They're fantastic at catching mosquitoes and that type of thing when they come out at night time. And in the background, a very prolific fruiter. It's an apricot tree, one of the many fruit trees we've got here, and of course the pond behind me as well, with the large so-called bog garden as well. So I reckon that pretty well concludes our very brief look around a sustainable garden. As I mentioned at the very beginning, you don't need to have all these things. You can just make sure you've cater for the birds and the bees and all the other insects, very important. That insects reminds me we've actually got a lot of insect hotels here. But thank you for joining us.